Republican pundits recently learned who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. She's their worst nightmare. And I think that they probably sense the level of excitement surrounding her campaign and realize that left-wing populism is in fact a threat to their political ideology. And as a result, right-wing smear merchants came out in droves to viciously smear her, but unfortunately for them, they ended up looking like complete idiots in the process, because if you try to fearmonger about a particular candidate, you might want to make sure that you don't inadvertently promote their highly popular policy ideas in the process. Take a look.
Last night, a 28-year-old socialist from New York defeated longtime Democratic incumbent in a congressional primary race. As President Trump said tonight, he got his ass kicked. And many are hailing Cortez as a rising star on the political landscape. But in reality, her views, her policy positions are actually downright scary. Look, by the way, he was a guy that was supposed to take over for Nancy Pelosi, perhaps. Look very carefully. This is the future. This is your modern Democratic Party. Cortez, who will likely win the general election in a Democratic district, is pushing for, let's see, single-payer universal health care, universal jobs, government-subsidized housing for everybody, tuition, free colleges. She wants to abolish ICE and, of course, impeach President Trump. Watch this.
Would you push for a Trump impeachment should you win?
Well, I would support impeachment. I think that we have the grounds to do it. I think what really we need to focus on is making sure that we are advocating for the policies to win in November. But ultimately, I think that what we need to kind of focus on is ensuring that we can, when people break the law, potentially break the law, that we have to hold everyone accountable and that no person is above that law.
Now, the only difference between the self-proclaimed socialist that you just saw and the rest of the Democratic Party is she's actually more honest.
So, of course, that was Trump bootlicker and Republican Party propagandist Sean Hannity, who states her policy positions are actually downright scary. It's almost like the Republican Party is becoming a parody of itself at this point. Because let's look at those policy positions. I mean, what about that would scare someone who is reasonable and rational? That is nothing more than populist ideas that polls really well with the majority of Americans. I mean, for example, look at Medicare for All. 59% of Americans support that, according to Kaiser Family Foundation. When you look at her federal jobs guarantee program, that polls above 50% in literally all 50 states. Now, when you look at Utah, they actually have the lowest amount of support for a federal jobs guarantee, but still, even then, they're at 57%, whereas most other states are closer to 70%. So, most Americans agree that a federal jobs guarantee is necessary. Now, when you look at gun control, well, 7 in 10 Americans favor stricter gun laws, according to a CNN poll conducted by SSRS, and a Quinnipiac poll found that 97% of Americans want universal background checks, and an ABC News/Washington Post poll found that 50% of Americans support an assault weapons ban. When you look at climate change, 59% of Americans think that the environment should be prioritized over energy production. When it comes to campaign finance, Ipsos finds that a plurality of Americans oppose Citizens United, and 57% want limits placed on money raised by super PACs. And additionally, in 2015, a CBS News poll found that 84% of Americans think money has too much influence in political campaigns. Bankrate found that 62% of the country supports free college for all, and more Republicans support it than oppose it. When it comes to Wall Street regulation, the Lake Research Partners found that 91% of Americans believe Wall Street regulations are important, and 78% want Wall Street held accountable. When it comes to LGBTQ rights, Pew finds that 62% of the country now supports marriage equality. Now, when it comes to immigration, Americans are kind of all over the place on this particular issue. A 2013 poll from Gallup found that while 83% of Americans support increased border security, 87% actually support citizenship for those already in the country. Now, when it comes to abolishing ICE, that's really the only policy that doesn't have majority support that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is championing. But a HuffPost YouGov poll finds that pretty large percentages of voters really aren't sure on this matter yet, meaning that we still have time to convince them that we hold the right position here. That could change. So basically, everything on her platform is overwhelmingly popular with the exception of abolishing ICE, but again, Americans are really undecided. So, I mean, we have this unique opportunity to adopt this bold position and convince them. And I don't even really need to bring up polls for things like solidarity with Puerto Rico or women's rights, because who would be against that? But I do want to highlight support seniors. That's got to be my favorite here. Again, we got to hear what Sean Hannity said about policies like support seniors.
Her policy positions are actually downright scary.
The average Fox News viewer is older than 70. And you have this D-bag on Fox News trying to convince his elderly audience that support seniors is somehow, quote, a downright scary policy position.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
So look, these aren't just mainstream policy ideas. Some of these ideas that she's championing are supported by the overwhelming majority of the American population. But when you look at the Overton window in this country, well, then you can see that it's shifted so far to the right that when these types of populist left-wing ideas get proposed, they might seem radical because what is perceived as respectable political discourse in this country falls between the center-right and the far-right. So when people hear about these popular left-wing ideas, then they think, oh wow, this person might be a radical. But in actuality, the real radicals are modern right-wingers. And they are doing everything in their power to fearmonger relentlessly and claim that the sky is falling and that, a communist takeover is inevitable, because these ideas, they have mainstream appeal. Their policy positions are not popular, which is why they're going to such great lengths to demonize Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now here's a quick compilation of some of the vitriol that has been spewed at Alexandria over the course of the last week, and it is disgusting.
And this admitted communist that just won the primary in New York, she's a communist who preaches race war, class war, right out of communism. Now there's her quote. Moreover, this is put out by her. Moreover, not only is this about gender and race, it's about class. Alexandria Cortez. Hey, lady, if it's so good, go to any of the third world countries that have got socialism and see how fast you run out of there with your tail between your legs.
What you see here is the sort of howling at the moon branch of the Democratic Party, in which they throw out whatever radical proposal they want and then suggest that this is truly authentic, that moral clarity lies in making proposals that are completely untenable, that will never be paid for.
These people are communists. And that's a real problem. And Democrats are going to have to contend with this. And this is not going to be the last sitting Democrat who is going to get ousted by some socialist who wants free stuff for everybody that comes out of nowhere.
None of that is to say that it's workable for Democrats to build a strategy, and no one would, to build a strategy around a 28-year-old first-time Congresswoman from the Bronx. And the Republicans would like to make her the face of the Democratic Party. I see the red socialist fist back there for added effect.
It's so subtle. How did you miss it? These are shrieking radicals. Gone is the party of JFK. Here is the party of radical socialism.
And, she's as radical as can be. But again, it is very easy to virtue signal about policies that have no impact when they're never implemented.
Yeah. Free, college, free health care, ending ICE, ending all border control. This doesn't resonate very well with the majority of Americans. What do you think?
Well, it resonated with the Democrats. It's the Bernie message that it seems like millennials are responding to. And she went to Twitter. It was a grassroots campaign, so she said all the right things, and it seemed to work for her. But people are also suspecting, some of my sources think that she got some money from Republicans secretly that wanted her in the midterms because Crowley could not be beaten. So this is a huge upset for Democrats because many they believed Crowley was too strong, and perhaps Republicans helped her win.
She will be a backbencher that doesn't really get a whole lot done, but she'll be vocal. She will be a hit on the cable news circuit. She'll be a media celebrity, but she won't exactly be an effective member of Congress. You're turning over somebody in leadership who could get things done for somebody new, a Democratic socialist of all people, who can't get things done. No new member of Congress can get things done.
Now, the irony here is that as they demonize her as a communist and say that she's a radical, they're really the radicals here. Because again, I went over each and every single one of her policy positions and told you that most of them don't just have majority support, but they have the overwhelming support of the American people. Yet, these far-right wingers have the nerve to call her a radical? I mean, Alex Jones said that she's an admitted communist that preaches race war, class war. One, she never said she's a communist, but when he says that she wants a class war, she's talking about how you can't disaggregate race and issues of social justice from economic issues and issues of economic justice. So, I mean, he's just straight up lying. Doesn't even care. He's lying. And also, we have Ben Shapiro, who called her policy ideas radical proposals, and he said she's as radical as can be. Michelle Malkin called progressives like her shrieking radicals, but again, they're the radicals. Look at the policy ideas that they're proposing. They don't have majority support. When you juxtapose their ideas with Alexandria's ideas, well, Americans side with her. But yet they call her the radical. Unbelievable. Now, one host said that her policies, quote, don't resonate well with the majority of Americans. That's just completely factually incorrect. And a liberal analyst, quote, liberal analyst said, some of my sources think that she actually got some money from Republicans secretly. Now, where did she get that from exactly? Well, she got it from her anus. She pulled it right out of her ass and decided to say it even though she has absolutely zero evidence for this claim. Nearly 77% of Alexandria's donations were from small individual contributors and only 23% were over $200. So you can try to lie about her record by conspiracy mongering, Miss Fox News liberal analyst, but we all know that you're lying, and I think even the host smelt bullshit when you said that because he didn't really push for more. So, additionally, the guy at the end there, he condescendingly said that, well, you know, she's a newcomer, she can't get anything done, and he kind of rolled his eyes when he said she's a democratic socialist of all people. I mean, these individuals are so out of touch, they live in that DC bubble, and they think that right-wing radicalism is perfectly acceptable and mainstream, but left-wing radicalism that actually polls really well among Americans, that's just crazy, that's nonsense. But what they're saying is completely idiotic. And this guy who's claiming that she can't get anything done, well, he doesn't realize that she actually can probably get more done than other people in Congress because she's not put on a leash by her donors like other corporate puppets in Congress. So she can actually do whatever she wants. She's free. She just has to represent her constituents. So she might actually be the most effective member of Congress. But again, the irony here is that all of the people calling Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and progressives radicals are actually radicals themselves. Because again, when you go back to the Overton window, Democrats are very similar to conservative parties we see around the world and in Europe. And Republicans are actually more comparable to fringe right-wing extremist parties than mainstream conservative parties we see across Europe. I mean, think about this. Do you think that Christian Democrats in Germany or conservatives in the UK are more similar to Republicans or Democrats? Those conservative parties that we see in Europe are much closer to Democrats, ideologically speaking. So really, it's modern Republicans who are radicals given the context of American politics and seeing just how far to the right the Overton window is. But the reason why these right-wing pundits are trying to frame Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as radical and say that she's a communist and smear her is because they know left-wing populism is the only thing that beats back the rise of right-wing demagogues. Now, what did centrist and center-right people have to say about her victory?
Once upon a time in American politics, it was a business of persuasion. You would try to persuade people that your ideas were slightly better than the other side. It has become a game of incitement. And what Trump is doing is radicalizing American politics. And he is a beneficiary the more radical politics becomes. When it becomes a game of incitement between a far left who says everybody's going to have a government job, everybody's going to have daycare, everybody's going to have retirement, free school, free high school, free college education, as we careen towards $30 trillion in debt. When we have dishonest progressivism, right, and we have dishonest Trumpism, an alienated middle that surrenders. They break their will to fight back. They become disenfranchised and hopeless about the idea that free market capitalism or liberal democracy can prevail in a radical era.
He called what she's championing, the ideas that she's fighting for, dishonest progressivism, and he equated her to a left-wing equivalent of Donald Trump, and claimed that, well, you know, if we have far leftists and far right-wingers, then there's going to be this middle who is completely left out and abandoned and feels disenfranchised. But again, going back to the Overton window for the final time in the context of American politics with a right-wing Overton window, what he's describing as left-wing radicalism is really just left of center in actuality. Maybe L1 on this chart at the furthest, but I think it's more accurate to place someone like AOC left of center since her policy proposals actually have bipartisan support. When you look at Medicare for All, for example, well, more Republicans actually favor it than oppose it. So basically, any time someone describes a left-winger as a radical, you can pretty much dismiss that individual as someone who knows nothing about politics. Because someone who's a centrist in the context of American politics with a right-wing Overton window, really, they are center-right. So again, don't let people convince you that left-wing radicalism and this rise of communism is upon us, because that's horseshit. What we really should be worrying about is right-wing radicalism, given that the Overton window is so far to the right, and we actually have literal Nazis running in the United States currently, and a right-wing party that's carrying out proto-fascist policies as we speak. It's right-wing radicalism that's the problem, not left-wing radicalism. You'd be more likely to find a unicorn in public than a left-wing radical. Now, luckily for us, even if right-wing radicalism is a problem, the antidote to that poison that's poisoning political discourse is left-wing populism. And thankfully for all of us, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is showing us that Americans are progressive when it comes to the policy issues.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.